Hey everyone, and welcome to the latest round of Iron Quest. On this call, we're going to be reviewing the vizzes that were submitted as part of the women round that we ran earlier this year. I'm privileged to be joined by two co-hosts today. So we have Dzifa Amexo and Emily D. Padua. And if you were at TC this year, they completely ruled like TC. So they were everywhere, winning all of the awards and everything. So I'm super honored to have them both on joining me today. Dzifa, do you want to introduce yourself?
I would love to. Thank you so much for having us, Sarah. My name is Dzifa. I work as a data technology consultant at Curious by day, by night, Tableau social ambassador. Also help co-lead a few Tableau user groups. And outside of that, I'm totally Beyonce obsessed, and I also love Tableau. So super excited to be here today with you. And yeah, thanks for having me.
Amazing. Thank you. And Emily, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Emily de Padua. I'm currently a Tableau Public Ambassador, and I have been Live, Laugh, Loving Tableau since 2016, so time flies. And just like Dzifa, I am very obsessed with Taylor Swift, and I live, laugh, love the Taylor Swift era. And I'm excited to be here today with you all.
Amazing. Thank you. I feel like we should have done a Beyonce Taylor Swift round, and then that would have been like so perfect, right? But hey, with women, it's still relevant. I don't think anyone did a viz on Taylor Swift or Beyonce for this, but hey ho, we'll have to do it again. Anyway, let me I'll just stop sharing for a minute. I'll cut this bit out. But I want to share my screen for the vizzes. I think it's this one. No, hang on. Sorry, I can't find it.
Good.
It's here. You're doing great.
It's here, but it's the wrong screen. There we go. So, okay, so we're going to start off by reviewing the vizzes in alphabetical order today. So we're going to start with Ali. So let me just open up Ali's viz. So he's done a viz on International Women's Day. And I remember seeing this on Twitter, actually. So I think it may have even got viz of the day. I'm not sure. I'll have to check on that. But it's certainly a really, really nice viz. I'm instantly drawn to the colors and the scatter plot in the top right. I don't know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I saw this and also on Twitter, and I was like, oh my gosh, first sense, it's absolutely beautiful. I feel like it's something that I'd see in like a news article. So I really like just the overall layout and design of this. And at first, I think my first question was like, oh, like, how do I read this chart, even though it's a scatter plot? And then he had the legend in the upper right hand corner, and I was like, this is the perfect kind of guide to just understand how these countries compare to each other and see the different trends based off of like the different continents. So I really love the use of color here. I think it tells a really good story how, you know, women spend so much more time and unpaid care and labor. And kind of just seeing that across like developing nations was really, really great to see. So I really love this viz, and I don't know if I have any feedback for it because I think it's beautifully done. And yeah.
I also really like this viz. I love the layout, just as you both called out, the layout. I love how vibrant it is, like especially because the background, it's still a color, but it's not like overpowering. I like the overall color palette. My only suggestion is really two things. I think the color contrast with the color palette, and it's so hard, especially when you have like 5 or 6 minimum colors you're trying to balance and give each unique color their own distinct color palette. So I think either a little playing around with the placement of colors, like Africa and Asia, for example, the orange and the hot pink is just like a little too similar to be next to each other. I think if, say, like the hot pink was used for South America, for example, it wouldn't be that jarring. Like it wouldn't be so blending next to each other. And then I think maybe a little more play on the contrast for Europe and Oceania. I know it's so hard because again, you're trying to balance giving each individual dimension its own color. And once you get after 5 or 6, it can be really hard. But I think maybe instead of going lighter for Oceania, maybe seeing it as like almost like a dark navy blue, might just playing around with that color contrast. And then my final edit is just on the layout. I would have loved to see the world in the top right, maybe just have a little more space in the overall organization. Again, it's a really great one, and I understand why it had to be, because you wanted it to line up with the header narration and everything, but I think maybe giving the worldview just a little more space in the viz would have maybe brought out that like just the kind of geographic hierarchy that's going on. But overall, it's a really nice viz, and these two feedbacks are like really nitpicking from my perspective.
Yeah, no, and I totally agree. I think the color's tricky with any viz, and I think with this one, if we think about accessibility, the points that you've raised are totally valid. Especially when we look at it on the world view, you wouldn't be able to differentiate between Africa and Asia, right? It's just those colors are too alike. I think that what I really appreciate about this is two things in particular. One is that the colors for men and women, he's using green for men and purple for women, which is great to see, because I know some people still like to do the blue and the pink thing, which we do not support. So it's really nice to see those colors here that aren't like gender related. And also there's a lot on this viz, but it's all detailed and easy to understand thanks to the legend. So you've even got things like reference lines that add that additional level of analytics that sometimes people don't think to include. So I really appreciate those little touches.
Mhm.
Yeah, well, great job, Ali. Thank you for entering. Moving on, the next viz we have is by Aliu, I think. Sorry if I'm saying your name wrong. So this one is called Honoring Her as the Underrepresentation of Women in European Street Names. So I think we've got a long form viz here. So we're looking at different countries and the number of streets named after individuals, and then of those, how many were men and how many were women by city. So the
It's
first
so
thing
the header. The
the
header is
header,
so catchy.
yeah, the first thing I was going to say, the first thing I'm drawn to is the header and that image, right? Which is nice because it's got the street name at the top, which I think, you know, is completely like on point for the topic. And I think what these bars here work really well. So you've got the 100% bar, so we can see really clearly the proportion of those streets that are named after women, which I think works really well in conjunction with the table.
Yeah, I really like that because I think sometimes if you're just looking at the numbers, like, oh, this has a high number of women streets named after women. And I think looking at like the bigger cities versus not capital cities, it can be a little bit misleading. So I like how you called out the percentages here. I really like that. And then I would suggest making the font a little bit bigger. I think aesthetically it looks great. It is a little hard to read. I mean, I know where Madrid is, but for some of these other ones, the country that it's in, it's a little harder to read. So maybe increase that a little bit, and then also make it a tad darker. But overall, I really like how simple everything is laid out, and being able to see the trends between capital cities, not capital cities, is really nice from that aspect.
Yeah, absolutely. Emily, I think you're going to
I
say something.
agree. I agree. I love the simplicity of this whole viz straight out of the gate. I like that a lot. And my only nitpick, oh, and I also really liked the tooltips because it's so simple. And sometimes tooltips are an afterthought, which they are not. They can enhance your overall viz. So I love how clean they are, even if you go up to like the info guide up at the top. They're pretty clean and easy to follow. I think my suggestion for this viz is I think with the legend, maybe there's a chance of having some interactivity, especially you could highlight and play a little bit with the interactivity with the legend, especially because you're calling out already. Yeah.
Yeah, I think if we think of this from an IronViz perspective, I think what's missing here is just some additional context. So clearly this is an issue, right? There's a lack of street names named after women. So maybe some additional, the fact that this data set exists, that kind of says everything that we need to know about that. So maybe some additional context about that at the beginning to set the scene and tell that story. And I'd like to see this at the highest level. So across Europe, what does it look like aggregated, rather than just broken down? But other than that, I think it's, as you said, really clean, easy to understand, a simple design. It works really well.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you. Next up, we have a viz by Anindita. And this one is called Pig Tax. Why does it cost more to be a woman?
That is so true. I'm really excited to see the data on this because I know it's a thing, but I don't think it's like explored pretty often. So I'm excited about the
Yeah,
topic.
feel free to jump in with some feedback as I scroll through.
I just love the pop design of this all. Like really right out the gate catches your eye. I love that right out the gate, there's a question to be asked. Why does it cost more to be a woman? And then it's like integrated throughout this viz, which is just such a great use of storytelling and user guidance. And then the hot pink pop like sidebar also giving guided narration. This might have been one of my favorites of the bunch. I'm sorry, everyone was great, but this one really stuck out to me. I know, and I also think this barcode is so clever. What a clever use of a barcode of a bar chart.
That's really cool.
Oh, I love that. I did not connect the
Yeah.
dots. Genius.
Mhm. Yeah, it took me a second too. I really love the use of image, and it's like pop art. It's so great.
Yeah, this is like really visually like appealing. I could almost imagine this being in a magazine, right? It's just
Mhm.
the way it's designed with this bar down the side just helps keep that story together. Just makes it flow really well. I do like how there's a focus here on shopping, and how they've embedded. I think this is from Amazon. I might be wrong, but just the contrast in the prices is just insane. It's the same product, right?
Mhm.
I think that just tells the story really well. We have the classic pink and blue, right, that I mentioned before. But I think in this kind of context, that's it completely works.
I
Yeah,
also really like at the bottom too, like the real world kind of case studies. I think it's one thing to like see the data, but then bring in like this is what companies have been doing with this to kind of bring attention and make note of it. I think that really just enhances the storytelling from like, here's the data. Now this is something like we all know Burger King, it's something that makes it a little bit more personalized along with little screenshots. So I really liked how this was laid out. I'd suggest throughout, I think some keywords are bolded, like here, like chick fries is something that stands out to me, and axe the pink tax. If you scroll back up to the top in one of the first two, I think it's actually the second chart.
this one.
Yeah, when it talks about what do women pay more for men, I just emphasize here the amounts. Like when I read this, I was like approximately $1,351. Like that is a lot. I think maybe you could miss over it without having that bolded. And then two, the dumbbell charts here, I do really like being able to see the discrepancy between men and women. I think it could be nice to have the labels here also just shown as a default on the top. And then going up to that chart at the top, this one, and I don't know the specific numbers, but the first one, kind of looking at personal care products, I'd really like to understand the numbers there. It just looks like a really large uh like difference. Like and maybe that is 13%, but kind of just look at it, I was like, wow, that looks really, really jarring. But I do like the use of the ombre as well. I think it is, pink and blue for men, but I think it kind of shows that, women are having to pay more and they're being charged more. So I really like that aspect. I would say on the children's clothing, that one I'd maybe suggest bringing the font more to the right because it gets a little bit cut off. We can't see that that's 4%, and just making that a little bit easier to read.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing that I appreciate with this viz is the white space. So there's so much space for everything to breathe as we scroll through.
Mhm.
I think you've got these quite dominant charts, and if it was cramped, it would just be overwhelming. But the fact that they're all spaced out, it looks really nice.
Flows
Mhm.
so nicely.
Yeah.
Yeah, my only suggestion if we scroll up to the top, I went back and forth a little bit more in the first and second
Yeah.
parts. I went back and forth on if I like because I love the dumbbell chart and the ombre, but I kind of wished there was a little cohesion between the two because they're so next to each other and there's so much cohesion in the whole chart that I almost wished it was like pick one or the other, like either have the dumbbell chart with the shapes in both of them, so it shows that like follows into the next, or have the ombre in both sections, because I think that would have just visually cued that it's like, okay, here's evidence one and here's evidence two. That's my only nitpick on an overall really great viz, is maybe just a slight design, just a little cohesion to guide from one to two. That's it.
Yeah, I agree. I think I always look for consistency in icons and things like that. So we've got the pink outline icons here, and then we've got these images here. I'd like to see more cohesion between those. Also with these ones, it took me a second to kind of figure out which was the man and which was the woman. So maybe that could be clearer, maybe using some different types of icons. But yeah, overall, really, really good job. All right, next up we have Jiwon, and this one is on US presidents and unforgettable women. Just going to scroll through, okay. So here we're looking at a timeline, by the looks of it, with its key people, so women's rights activists, historical women, leaders, first ladies, first daughters, and talk of the town, however way you categorize those. If I hover over one, then we get some more details and quotes and things like that.
I like that it's even though it's more an exploratory viz, it's single screen still for the most part. Like you can still, it stays in like one dimension. And I like that there are some really great components here overall, and that it's not, and that the color palette is more like orange to neutral to blue versus like red and blue, like we mentioned, or even like red and green, which we've seen when we're trying to show who has more versus less. I'm curious if there's a way to kind of reposition this so that there's more, the women are more brought to the forefront of the data story versus the men. It's almost like a commentary of like, why do women have to be deemed unforgettable by the words of other men, which is kind of a commentary on women's place, women's like designation in the narration of history itself, which I think is a really interesting way to expand this Viz's data story. Because that's what I came away with, was wondering like, why is it that women almost have to get co-signed by important men in history to be deemed unforgettable? And I think that's something I took away from this viz, and I'd love to see that explored.
Yeah, it's 100% correct. I think it's a viz about women by men almost, right? So you're only seeing like the men's stance on these things. There's no like woman's voice to complement it. What I do like is the fact that we have these timelines that run cohesively, so we could almost look across and see kind of the types of themes that were happening around those years, all on the same kind of row, right? I think that's quite interesting. So I think if you spent the time to dig into this, you might see common themes between some of the quotes that the people were saying around that time. So I thought that was quite interesting. What I'd like to understand is what the colors mean, unless there's no color legend that I can see, and I'm not too sure what the colors mean unless one of you's figured it out. I haven't.
I think the blue is the most to say. That's what I took it. Like maybe that's me.
I like word.
This one's longer than that one, I think.
Oh, okay, then maybe not. Okay, yeah, I'd like to understand that. But it's really great components. Like there's pieces. The pieces are great.
Yeah, and it's clean, it's easy to understand. Yeah, I think it's good. It's an interesting approach. I wouldn't have thought of doing this, but I do like how they've approached this topic.
Yeah, I like how at the top two you have the different perspectives. I do think, to Emily's point, right, it would be really cool to see this flipped, like quotes by first ladies or things that were said about first ladies, and then have that broken down as different sections. You can look at women's right, historical women, and like you can kind of slice and dice as you wish. I would suggest, actually, for me at first, like seeing the timeline and like the size of the bars is a little bit confusing. So maybe a legend for that's indicating the length of the presidency, I'm assuming, as well as the color would be really helpful. And then also some of them don't have names, so maybe through the use of like annotations or something, I think that could be helpful, because I thought that this was all William, but it's like different people. So I think kind of playing around with that to have it be a little bit more clear could be helpful. But I do like the concept of kind of like a text analysis. It would be really cool to see maybe like a sentiment analysis as well. I know this is just one quote, but I'd be interested to see like what they said before and kind of after, because I think sometimes that can have a little bit more impact to kind of like really understand what someone was saying. If it was something good, if it was actually something negative. But overall, I really like kind of just the data that they decided to analyze, and I think it is a great start.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, moving on. We have a viz by Katie. This one is looking at gender equality in the European Union.
This is your home state, Sarah. You're gonna have
Well,
to.
we're not in the EU anymore, so technically not. Thank you,
Give it
Brexit.
time. You guys will be back in there.
Yeah,
If they have us back, right? Okay, so we've got gender equality rates across each EU country. 6 core domains: health, knowledge, money, power, time, and work, with scores ranging from 1 to 100.
yeah, I really liked how this started off with an overall perception of just the scores. And then it did a focus on power. It was like, power is what I want to focus on. Let's explore this and see why this is so low. And I think that story was really well told. I would suggest utilizing color a little bit differently, right? Because I think at first when I was looking at all of these, this like red to green, if we're only going to focus on power, maybe we like gray out everything else and just have that highlight and think about how, if we're using red, kind of how that flows in and things like that. I'd also like to really understand in this map aspect. And I think this is my non-European Union. If like region is really important here, like is there a reason why we really need the map? Because it would be nice to see somewhere in like a line chart where we just have the year 1, year 2, and we're able to see that increase. I think that could be really impactful. And then just a suggestion on the map icons. I see the thought. I think it could go without. I think it's just adding a little bit more, but I really also like the annotations. I think they add to the storytelling. And overall, I'm like, okay, power we need to work on, and you've proved that. So I think that was really well done.
Yeah, I agree. I think with the map, as with any map, the issue you have is that landmass. Each country is a different size, and this country we've got 5 highlighted. One of them is Luxembourg, and like Luxembourg is, I think, one of the smallest countries in the world. It's tiny, and so you can barely see it. It's only because there's a label there that says +34, and when you hover over, you get this tiny like selector. So I think I agree with you. Maybe a bar chart or something would be better than a map, because in this case, I don't think it matters where those countries are. I don't think we're looking at that from a regional perspective. Another thing I would look at is just some of the formatting. So I would probably suggest taking off these borders. You've got the white borders around everything. The quadrant maybe could still stay, but I'd just take some of the borders away and maybe just give it some padding around each element. So just give it more space to breathe.
Took the words out of my mouth there with the padding. I think the padding could have given just a little more breath, and also because it's just so squished, because there's just not a border. I like the lollipop chart at the bottom with the flags, and I wonder, to kind of elevate the cohesion, maybe that could have been carried over into the map. Instead of showing a map, maybe instead we show all the different flags for the countries being called out in the bottom left quadrant. I agree on the colors. I would have loved to see just maybe I think it's the dark gray is just so overwhelming that I kind of wonder if you played with the opacity and just brought it down to more of like a light gray instead of a dark gray, or if you commit to like a dark gray background, maybe leaning a little more to more of the dark black opacity, because it's kind of like in the middle of dark mode and light mode. And I think that's kind of impacting the color palette availability of what can work within that color palette. It's almost like you have to decide if you want to be light mode or dark mode in this vent. And I think that would help kind of give you more options in the color palette choice and a little more cohesion. But I like the data narration, and I like the lollipop charts. I feel like I don't see enough lollipop charts.
Yeah, these are good, and I appreciate the narration as well, and I appreciate the annotations. I think those are really, really useful. As for the color, I think it would be interesting to see what this looked like again, a white background or a light background, because you've got very saturated colors that don't necessarily work too well against that kind of darker background. So I'll be curious to see what that would look like. But overall, great job. All right, next one we have, so we're going to skip Kimberly because she didn't ask for feedback. So if you're listening, Kimberly, we love you.
You're playing.
And next we have a viz by Mohit, and this is The Magic of Shreya. So I think Shreya is an Indian singer born in 1984. She's actually born very close to my birthday. She sung professionally in over 20 languages, which covers major regions of India. And then I think this is wide, yeah, so we're going to scroll this way for this one. So there's a lot.
I love that.
Here. It's amazing.
I love the scroll.
This is really impressive.
I love it. I love the layout of a wide scroll, but then there's pockets clearly being like, here's section 1, here's section 2, because it makes it gives it such a great storybook reading experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything in particular you want to call out or you'd like me to focus on?
I liked the last section where the cherry picking, if you go all the way to the end, and I like that it mimics kind of the Spotify UI. And then if you click each one, it'll change the Spotify snippet code at the bottom. I think that's such a cool thing. I'm gonna snag that somewhere somehow. That's such an elegant.
This is it's really nice as well, because if you haven't heard of Shreya and you kind of figure out what songs to listen to first, Mohit's done it all for you here, right? He's got his favorites, and this is a great way to get started. I noticed that when I did my Stormzy viz, there was people in India reaching out to me saying, like, I'm listening to Stormzy now, like I didn't know him until like you did your viz, which just blows my mind. So this reminds me of that.
I think one with the disc, like what is it called? A CD. I'm showing my age. Yes, this one. Yes. I love this viz. At first, I was like, well, I don't really understand what's going on. But the question mark, I love that kind of explain how this is set up, what the different colors mean, and then the ability to select what you want to color by. So whether it's songs in their personal playlist or just other kind of facets, break that down. I really loved interacting with this. And so I've never heard of this artist, but I was like, oh, I'm like personally interested in what you're interested in. And then my next step would probably be to go to that cherry picker and be like, oh, you like the song? Let me kind of go over here and listen to it. So I really like the thought that was put into this in terms of designing just storytelling as a whole. We start off, if you don't know who this artist is, this is who she is, this is her reach, these are my personal favorites, and then just analyzing that, comparing it to other artists. So I think this is truly giving Iron Quest. I loved it, and there's just so many pieces to explore. I would love to understand a little bit more about the table that comes right after this. I think for me, I get all that information in the record player, but if someone really wanted the record level detail, this is something that maybe I'd put at the end. I think it just kind of felt like it broke up the story a little bit. So that would be my only suggestion there. But overall, really well done.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think this is all the songs at the most granular level. So I agree. I think putting that at the end, maybe even putting that behind a button or something, so it's there if you need it. Like we do with like business dashboards sometimes, if people want to download the data to Excel or whatever, I think that would work quite nicely there, but keep the design elements like front and center. But yeah, this is really, really impressive. So really, really great job. Okay, next up we have Nurudeen. And this is Nigerian. I'm not going to butcher the name. I think it's Gozi. Beacon of Wisdom and Resilience. So she was the first woman and first African to serve Director General of the World Trade Organization. I think this is a story about her life. And yeah, if I'm not mistaken, I was going to say this looks like a viz by Shola, the Angela Davis one that he got viz the day for. And he's given inspiration, which is great.
Okay.
All right. So I really like how this is laid out. It's very clear, like it gives you an intro about who she was, an intro to like her life, some books that she wrote. Just everything's super clean. There's lots of white space. Gives you like just enough information to find out all about her.
I love how this looks like a gallery and a museum. And I'm such a museum nerd. So anytime a viz looks like something it's mimicking the museum experience, I already love it from a layout perspective. I also like that there's a use of like a brown palette, which I think browns can be kind of hard to keep it vibrant, but this feels like this, even though the palette is brown, which is more of a neutral, it feels like a very vibrant palette. I think because of the play between the opacity and the background, and it's just such a great use of a color that I think isn't used very often in color palettes, which makes it so like just stick out. My only suggestion is if we scroll down a little, is this quote. I kind of want to move it up to be underneath the image because it's almost because what's happening with the layout is it's broken out into thirds, visual thirds, and by having the quote down at the bottom underneath the visual thirds, you're actually it kind of gets lost a little bit. So I think if you were to move it up into that white space, it would give that middle third just a little more something to draw the eye. And I think that would just kind of elevate the viz. It's just moving up and using that white space because I love the use of white space, but sometimes it can be too much white space and it can make a component just kind of stick out. But overall, I think it's a really great viz. It's a very simple viz. And in this case, simple is really great and elevated because it's so easy to follow and it's not an overwhelming viz, which is really great for first time readers.
Yeah, I'll just add on, I love you were just hovering over it, the icons used for the timeline. I think it's so subtle, but it really just adds to the entire viz and how it's very cohesive. So this is beautifully done. I would just suggest in terms of the chart that lists out the organizations, I'm assuming this is organization she's worked at, but just a little bit more context on that front I think would be helpful to understand that. And I think the bookshelf it always gets me whenever I see it. I'm like, oh, this is so cute, so beautiful. So well done on the tooltips as well. I think the font hierarchy and how you kind of laid that out is really well done. So
Yeah,
I love this viz.
they're really nice. There's only one thing I would change is just some of the fonts. So we have a lot of different fonts on this viz. So I'd try and just look for more like cohesive like font use, maybe just picking like one or two, maybe one for the headers where you've got the big kind of I think these are images with the underlined pieces, and then another one for everything else, just to make it look a little bit cleaner. But otherwise, I agree with everything you've said. It looks great. It's a great job. Okay, so we have 3 more. So we've got Rida. This one is looking at women's economic freedom.
I always do a little dance whenever
Let's
I'm
have a public. Let's just have a look.
Tableau cloud waiting for 5 minutes.
We need some of that hold music. Okay, women's economic freedom is protected almost everywhere. Let's scroll down to see everything. Okay. So we have these kind of bubble charts, I guess, looking at different, I don't know what you'd call these, like economic kind of measures, I guess. Things like marriage, mobility, workplace pay. And then we have a value which I imagine is out of 100 for like a score. Imagine the higher, the better, I guess. And then each of the circles is, oh no, actually it looks like maybe some of these numbers are higher. I don't know. Anyway, each of the circles is a country. I'm not too sure what the colors mean on the bubble chart. Maybe it's region.
Or maybe density, like the
overall
value.
The value. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I think we have the same information down here by country, but at a bar chart level. So we see all the kind of metrics by country.
I think it's so visually stunning in the first half, like with the beginning.
Yeah.
Well, especially with, you have a super visual header and then you dive right into the narration, which I really like the visual header a lot. I want to suggest maybe between the very visual header and then the charts, that there's maybe in between, there's just an opening narration kind of saying why we're here, explaining where the title comes from, because the title is just such an eye catcher that right at the gate, you kind of have to have a narration to go with it. And I know there's narration, like if you scroll down, there's some great narration that kind of starts to give the context of this data and our data story. But I almost wish, there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I feel like with the placement of the text in the bottom half of the page fold, we're getting a middle and an ending, but we didn't quite get a beginning narration. And I love this footer. The footer at the bottom is so pretty. So pretty.
I like how it kind of like it rounds everything off really nicely, frames the viz. Yeah, I agree. I think I'd make the text slightly bigger as well. It looks quite small at the moment. So we think about accessibility. I think the minimum is about 14 points suggested. Maybe I'm wrong. Emily, you did IronViz. What was the?
Oh my God, I think
there was a rule.
It was like 12 or 14, and I was like kicking myself. I was like, why is this not the default in Tableau then? Why is Tableau default everything to size 9?
Good question, Tableau. But yeah, I'd make this slightly bigger. And I agree, maybe just bringing some of that text up and just setting the scene up here to give, because there's plenty of room. We could add some text up here if we change the layout a little bit. I would personally add some more white space in between each of the elements as well, like what we've discussed with some of the other vizzes. Yeah, Dzifa, I don't know if you've got anything to add.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything you guys have said so far. I think this middle bottom part is probably my favorite part. I think with the text on the side, I start to see the story come out. And I think if in the beginning, keeping one of those two charts, I think introduces this is all the data, this is at a high level, and then it really focuses down on that top 20. So I think kind of just utilizing color a little bit more to bring out that story. I would love to have been able to feel like I answered the question, or like the title says, women's economic freedom is protected almost everywhere. And I'm left with the question like, wait, where is that? Or what's going on? So yeah, I think just kind of bringing the aspects to the bottom, kind of just bringing that more out would help with the storytelling. But overall, I do like the color palette. I think it's very subtle and it fits together. And yeah, it's a good viz with a lot of important information, just a little reorganization. I think some focus on color could take it to the next level.
Yeah, great job. Thank you for entering. All right, so next up we have Victory. And this viz is on gender response to violence against women and girls. So first of all, I appreciate how she's got a content warning on there. That's like always good for these topics. I think it's really, really important.
Such a great use of the overlay.
Yeah.
And embedding it, like the thing I like about that particular technique is there's no way to enter the viz without it, but once you close it, once you collapse it, like it disappears, which is so functional and helpful. Yeah,
that's really good. So I'm just going to scroll down so we can see the whole thing, but feel free to jump in. Okay.
First off, I really like, I've noticed across the whole batch, but particularly in this viz, a monochromatic palette, but then one specific color used as a highlight, which is a really great use of contrast within a monochromatic palette. And it's just so visual and eye-catching. Even the chart selection, like down at this bottom in the floral, and then you'll see in the next slide how that floral shape transitions into dumbbell charts. How like it's just very cohesive choices and design, so slick. Like I really love how eye-catching it is and how dynamic it is, but still very guided especially on such a sensitive topic. So that way, like, the reader is still like kept on the specific path for the overall story that Victory is trying to tell, which I think is really great. And then there's a lot of opportunities for like nuance. So like I love this particular technique of like the drill down with these parameter actions. I think she's using parameter actions here. But I particularly love that because it just makes it such a seamless user experience.
Yeah.
Beautifully said. I think this one was so striking to me in a good way. I saw it and I was like, wow, this is making me kind of take a step back and pause and really like understand the data that's being shown. And I think Victor did a really good job of kind of taking a sensitive manner and handling it in a delicate way where I feel like this, of course, it's data about people, but it feels like humanized, like through the use of the flower in each individual country and being able to see the specific responses and then being able to see that aggregated as well. It's like, okay, here's the individual. Now let's compare as a whole and then also compare that across different attributes. I really feel like I saw the story from start to finish. And it really did, at the end, give me the points of like, these are the things that are standing out that are contributing to women thinking it's okay that violence is okay towards them. I think one thing in particular on the last screen, the last page, that I would just suggest, because when I was reading this, I was like, the top portion, I was like, wow, like I got the key takeaways. And one of the things here was the impact of education and the residents. And so in the order here, I would probably just put education first and then residents second, just as you're reading it kind of can flow with that call out. But overall, this is really, really well done. I think also white space is used really nicely here. Everything feels like it has enough room to breathe. So this is a sensitive topic, but really, really, really well done.
Yeah, I agree with everything that you've said. There's not much else to say, but I would say I like the way it's framed. I like how she's got this on a background image, but it's super subtle and goes with the theme. I really appreciate the go back home button because you wouldn't believe the number of vizzes where you get stuck because you click so far and then you can't go back without coming out and going back in again. So that's a really nice touch. And what I noticed as well with the coherent like design, you've got this flower. I guess you can call it a flower kind of here. And then that carries across to the next viz where you've almost got the same thing, but in the dumbbell chart, which by the way is like my favorite chart type. I think yeah, and I think it shows, you know, it's perfect for what you want to show in this scenario. I like how she's ordered it. It almost gives that really nice, I think this is by accident, but it gives this really nice kind of curved like kind of axes here, which is, this looks really cool. And then on the next page, just the interactivity as well is really well described. So often people just add a arrow and expect users to understand what to do with it, but it's really clear how you interact with this. And I agree, I think these indicators are really nice. I like how she's got instruction there as well. Yeah, it's really, really well done.
I think my only suggestion for this viz, because it's pretty, like, there's not really a lot of notes left, is maybe larger font size, especially like if you scroll up to the top, Sarah, and you see there's a lot of white space here in this one. I almost want the narration maybe like 3 or 4 pixels even bigger to really maximize the space, the padding and the space availability. I feel like if there's anything I've learned from Iris is the text can always be bigger. like, like, what's the harm in making the text just a couple points bigger? That was a learning for me. And this recent cycle was like, yeah, what's the harm in making, and I do kind of blame Tableau for this because in our defense, Tableau's default size is 0.9 when it should be 12 or 14.
I wonder if that would change. Now they know. And now accessibility is more of a thing. Maybe they'll change it. I don't know.
Right? That would be nice.
Yeah.
I feel like, yeah.
One thing I would add to this is, particularly if it was going to be entered for IronViz, is a call to action. So we're presenting all this information. I imagine that, you know, if you're someone that's reading this and you are a victim of domestic violence, I think what would be nice is at the end just to have some links where you could go for help, or organizations, charities that, you know, that support women that are going through difficulty. I think that just would be a nice touch to add.
Great.
Yeah. But anyway, great job. And then the last one we have is by Vignesh. And this one is on Malala Yousafzai. Is that how you say it? I don't know. I'm going to screw it up. I know she's like really famous. No, youngest
Like her
ever.
first name.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
enough.
Youngest ever Nobel Peace Prize winner. I think this viz just goes through her life story in the timeline. Click these. Yeah.
I love that this is another example of a more muted palette and then a bright gold or something being the highlight color. And I like the touch that it's when the pop-ups are enabled.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really, really like that. I also like the use of images here too. I think it's kind of making it feel like it's a story. I'm going through this timeline to kind of understand her journey to getting that Nobel Peace Prize. I think I would suggest like a cool kind of add-on would be to differentiate the year where she got that prize. Just to say like, hey, this was the year where it happened, maybe a different color or some sort of symbol. And then I'd also suggest, Sarah, you navigated through this pretty well, but at first I wasn't sure that you had to like click on them to display that. So maybe just a short little help icon or something to help guide the reader through the timeline.
Yeah, I agree. I think what's really nice with this one is it's almost like storytelling, right? It's only revealing that information once you're ready to receive it, which is nice. I think I would also add in some instruction because I was trying to click these. I would turn off this interactivity so it doesn't disappear. But it was only, you saw me going through, it was only once I realized that, okay, it's only where we've got the image that those are clickable. I think just some instruction on how to interact would be helpful. But I do like the way that they all come up, and the design's consistent. It's really easy to understand. The images are nicely integrated. But I like the idea of just having the one where she won the prize visible. I think that would be nice, rather than having to like go through and kind of search for it yourself.
My suggestion for this is I think it's something I'm trying to understand is the timeline ends when she gets married in 2021. And I'm curious on like what the thought was behind that decision on ending the timeline, especially because in the first half of the viz, we're focusing a lot on her Nobel Peace Prize, which happens in 2014. So I'm curious if like it ends in 2021 because that's where the data set kind of ends naturally. And if that's where we want to end this viz. And I think that ultimately leads into my next suggestion, which is kind of like a conclusion ending in some ways, because I think, and maybe that's what it ends with calling out even more into like 2014, like why 2014 was so significant, which was when she became the youngest Nobel Prize laureate. I think that's something I would really like to see in this viz. In a next iteration.
That's an interesting point. Yeah, I think because it's not like we reached 2021 and she stopped doing like fighting the fight, right? I'm sure she's done a lot of stuff since 2021, since getting married. That almost seems like that's a personal milestone for her, but not necessarily for her cause, right? Again, I think with this one, it would be nice if there was a call to action where you could go and find some more information or support some of the organizations that she's involved in.
It'd be cool if there was like a section of the viz that explored what she studied also, like what, especially because education is such a core value for her, to see what, like maybe an analysis on like what courses did she take, what studies did she do. That would have been, I think that could be another way, and also to like supplement more data into the viz as well, because I know working with time and sequence of events can kind of be a little limiting. So I think that's another way to broaden the data story.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But great job, and great use on color and I think the colors here work nicely as well. But that was our last one. So thank you both for joining me. Thank you for supporting this round. Thank you for everyone that entered. We'll have another round of Iron Quest coming very soon. So look out for the details of that on my blog, sarahlovesdata.co.uk. But until next time, see you soon.